appreciate you guys having the patience today. Obviously, the testimony we hear so far has been detailed and dynamic and I think helpful. So appreciate everyone here and the other folks that have been participating to patients. So please introduce yourself and welcome to the committee.
My name is Jonathan Lebecki. I'm a resident of Virginia. I have no financial conflicts of interest. I'm here representing myself, using my expertise that I've gathered over the past 10 years to hopefully advise the committee on some issues that aren't as nice and rosy as what you've been hearing all morning. My experience, I authored and helped pass the Crenshaw Amendment requiring the Department of Defense to investigate various psychedelic compounds involving active duty troops with the goal of retaining those troops in service so that they can finish out their service on their own terms, be it ETS, retirement, what have you. I also was one of the co-creators of the PATH Caucus, the Psychedelic Caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives. I've spoken on psychedelic policy at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and I also work with the Ukrainian government on trying to obtain authorization for research in Ukraine using psychedelic compounds to treat, in particular, PTSD as well as the victims of Russian rape rooms. I myself am a veteran. I served 4 years in the Marine Corps, entirely peacetime, as a loadmaster on C-130s. After the attacks on 9/11, I went back into service with the North Carolina Army National Guard. I served 8 years. I deployed 05-06, which is now 20 years ago. I don't have super cool stories. I'm not a SEAL. I'm not a general. I'm not an officer. I was just an average Joe. But when I came home, because of the constant shelling of my base, as well as the fact that my ex-wife moved in with a lieutenant colonel about 2 weeks before I came home, within 2 months of returning home, I put a gun to my head and I pulled the trigger. Squib load, manufacturing defect in the ammunition is why I'm still alive. I have a total of 5 suicide attempts, still have scars. I went through psychedelic therapy, frankly, by accident. I didn't think it would work. I went to the VA, and after my last suicide attempt in 2013, the head of psychiatry guaranteed me that I would get at least 1 hour of therapy every single week because I needed, at a minimum, at least that just to survive and exist. Because of an issue with another patient on the inpatient floor, she wasn't able to see me, so she asked if I, was willing to sit with one of her interns, which was very fortunate because as an intern, they're probably one of the few people that had actually gone through my entire VA file, which filled file cabinets. And at the end of the meeting, she slid a piece of paper across the desk and said, "Don't open this till you leave because we're not allowed to discuss this." I opened it up after leaving, and it said Google MDMA PTSD. Now, fortunately, the VA is now able to very much talk about this, and it's being talked about at the most highest levels, up to and including the secretary. I called up, and turns out that there was a Lycos, or I think it's called Resilient now, phase 2 trial involving veterans and first responders. Fortunately, somebody had dropped out of the trial, and so they had an extra slot that I was able to slide into because I lived in Charleston, right down the street from where they were actually conducting the research. I went through a 4-month protocol involving intensive psychotherapy not under the influence, as well as 3 sessions of psychotherapy under the influence with 2 therapists. I very rapidly after that started to see relief of symptoms. If you read the journal article on that study, I'm actually one of the people who still had PTSD at the 12-month mark. However, About 6 months after that, I fell below the line of having PTSD, and I haven't had PTSD since. I've also underwent extensive trauma after going through my therapy, to include having a gentleman drowned in the lake behind my house, and I dove in to pull him out. Unfortunately, he did not make it. Responding to a shooting in Charleston. Unfortunately, that gentleman didn't make it either. And when Ukraine was invaded, I started going to Ukraine to provide humanitarian aid, which is how I ended up working on psychedelic therapy in Ukraine. I actually went to Ukraine because the thought of going to a war zone was less stressful than working in the psychedelic community. And I wish that psychedelic policy in the United States was like it is in Ukraine, where the entire country knows the mental health issues, and everybody says, give it to the people who need it the most. And sadly, we've seen in several states, people, sometimes with nefarious intent, sometimes with the best of intent, have written laws that have dire consequences. For example, New Mexico recently passed a law that would allow massage therapists to prescribe or give psilocybin to toddlers. I don't believe anybody intentionally did that. However, this is where, as legislators, while we assume the best angels of people, and if all psychedelic therapy was as it's being described here, we wouldn't have situations where, for several examples of high-profile violent acts committed by people who frequently use psychedelics, to include Luigi Mangione, who actually quoted a line from How to Change Your Mind that I personally made. David DePape, who is the individual who took a hammer to Nancy Pelosi's husband, was a frequent Ibogaine user. The Jewish Museum shooter used psychedelics, as well as the partner of the Charlie Kirk shooter. I'm assuming since they were partners, it's very likely that shooter also used psychedelics. As everybody has said here, the use of psychedelics makes the mind very malleable. Which means if you have an amazing therapist, my two therapists, Michael and Annie Mithofer, were fantastic. I would have no issues with anybody doing therapy with them. There's also therapists in this space who terrify me. The fact that the General Steele, in his opening statement, said that these sessions have to be video recorded in order to prevent sexual assault and boundary violations is a huge issue. I think one of the things that the committee in the state of Louisiana can do is Louisiana doesn't have enough therapists. They don't have enough trained therapists. And I think the training should be more than paying $10,000 and showing up, doing taking MDMA yourself, and then getting a certificate. I wouldn't want a surgeon working on me if that's how medical school looked. And this is where there's several state universities in Louisiana that train therapists. This should be part of their curriculum. The best practices should be studied, and Louisiana has the ability to lead the way on creating the best therapist training for psychedelic assisted therapy. But one of the other major issues that we see is there's a propaganda war to end the war on drugs. There are several people, and I'm not saying anyone in this room, but there are people. I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews with media, and none of them have included the statement, people with severe mental illness should not do this without consulting a physician, and all the precautions, because it's, hey, this is cool, this is new. And frankly, most of the journalists support decriminalization and psychedelic reform, so anything that's bad for PR just doesn't get reported on, which is why you have to dig to find anyone reporting on the psychedelics usage in some of the cases that I mentioned. I come from this from a very different place. I didn't come from the counterculture. I didn't come from previous drug use. I did, like many in here, come from an abusive home. I was abused by my mother, as was my oldest brother. And my older brother also abused me. specifically when he would take LSD. So I've seen both the upside and the downside of how this can help. And one of the concerns that I have is we've seen several legal compounds, ketamine, nitrous oxide, opiates, that are overprescribed or just bought outright because it's legal, that have caused numerous legal issues, violence, and all of this, because people who have severe mental illness should not be doing these compounds unsupervised. And and frankly, a lot of the downsides, the negative side effects, aren't being reported. As much as we talk about how psychedelics can prevent suicide, and it has in my life, I know this works personally. But I also know several people who took these compounds and took their life. The Department of State issued a warning for the entire country of Peru that Americans should not go there and do psychedelic retreats because of the risk of sexual assault, robbery, and death. Sadly, if someone goes and does psychedelic therapy or takes psychedelics and then takes their life, it's, oh, well, they were crazy beforehand, too bad it didn't work, without any idea that the malleability of taking psychedelics is one of the causes of of the suicide. A recent survey by Mission Roll Call amongst veterans on, frankly, a very long list of different topics. This was to get actual data. This wasn't a push poll or anything else like we see a lot when it comes to drug policy. Only 27% of veterans believe that the VA should be involved in psychedelic therapy. 27% after a decade of near 100% positive coverage. You've got a good percentage of that, 20, 30%, their generation, drugs are bad, I don't care. But most veterans also know veterans who did this to try and get better, or for fun and went down a rabbit hole that they didn't come out of. And these are some of the things that we need to take into consideration, because it's not all peaches and rainbows. There's a lot of people out there who want to profit off of this. And I looked up the median income before coming in for Louisiana. It's $32,000. We heard here it's $10,000 to go, which means even if it were authorized right now in Louisiana, the only people who would have access are people who are currently using them illegally or people who are wealthy enough to afford it. And this is why, beyond training of therapists, the state can support FDA approval of these compounds. Because, I think that any veteran or anybody with trauma, for that matter, who takes this compound should be assured that the safety is at least that of an Advil sold at CVS. But it's also rather interesting because it feels like we've been here before, where the state was told, if you just legalize medical marijuana, you'll cure veteran suicide. You had people come in here and say that you can't get high that you can smoke a tractor trailer full of hemp and can't get high. And we all knew that was a lie. And it was done because there's people who want to end the drug war. They disagree with narcotics being illegal. And that's a conversation that should be had. But medicine isn't a movement. And when medicine becomes a movement, it becomes about political science and not about science. And I've personally seen, participants and retreat members who were videotaped under the influence at a retreat for fundraising ads, having their faces put up on Facebook ads saying, look at how great we are, immediately following treatment. And people say, well, why is that such a big deal? I had left-wing radical counterculture people go after not only me, but also my family. Using pictures of my 16-year-old son in articles on him being a white supremacist. He's not even close, but also less than a month ago, he had to be hospitalized. And I frankly wish he had access to this. but I also would never send them to a retreat center. And to answer your question, yes, I absolutely would do MDMA assisted therapy again if I needed it. And if I could go back in time, I would absolutely do the therapy, but I would stay the hell out of the psychedelic movement.
Well, Mr. Lebecki, we appreciate your testimony today, and obviously, we stack this committee with certain folks from different backgrounds and different opinions, and obviously welcome testimony that may be inconsistent with prior testimony. So we appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll be available to this committee as we move forward with our work, and you can provide us with your with your opinion, your information, like you have done today. So thank you very much. The board is clear. So